Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mental Minute. Today we're going deep on something that I think a lot of us have felt at one point or another. Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it's that feeling that you're a fraud even when you're successful.
Right, like you don't deserve any of your achievement.
Exactly, like you're just waiting to be found out.
Yeah, totally. And so to really dig into this, we're going to be looking at Wikipedia as our source.
Okay, sounds good.
So according to Wikipedia, imposter syndrome is the subjective experience of perceived self-doubt in one's abilities and accomplishments compared with others, despite evidence to suggest the contrary.
I think that's a pretty good definition.
Yeah, it really captures that feeling of like, you've done well, but you still
Yeah.
feel like you're faking it.
Right, and it can really hold you back.
Totally. So what are some signs someone might be dealing with imposter syndrome?
Well, one big one is downplaying your achievement.
Like when you get a promotion and you think, oh, they must have made a mistake.
Yeah, or you attribute your success to luck. Mm-hmm. Or you compare yourself to others and only focus on their strengths.
Right. And all of that can lead to a fear of failure and avoiding taking risks.
And that's how it can really hold you back.
Exactly.
Now, one thing I've heard is that imposter syndrome is just a woman's problem, but Wikipedia says it affects men and women pretty equally.
Yeah, that's true. The early research was mostly on women, but now we know it's much more widespread.
Okay, so it affects everyone, but I do wonder if men and women experience it differently.
Oh, for sure. Societal expectations play a huge role.
Yeah, for example, maybe men feel more pressure to appear confident, so they don't talk about feeling like imposters. And maybe for women, the pressure to prove themselves in male-dominated fields makes it worse.
Yeah, that's definitely possible.
So it's not about saying everyone has the exact same experience, but acknowledging that it's a common thing that goes beyond gender.
Right.
And it's surprisingly common, too. Wikipedia says studies show it affects anywhere from 9% to 82% of people.
Wow, that's a huge range.
I know. Why is there such a big difference? Well, it depends on how you define and measure it. Some studies use a really broad definition, while others are more specific.
So it's safe to say a lot of people have felt like imposters at some point.
Absolutely. And it's even more common in certain groups like high achievers or people from minority backgrounds.
Okay, so we've talked about how common it is and how it can affect anyone, but why does it happen in the first place?
Well, Wikipedia says it's often linked to things like perfectionism, neuroticism, and low self-esteem.
So how do those traits lead to feeling like an imposter?
Let's take perfectionism. If you're always striving for flawlessness, you might never feel good enough.
Yeah, because you're always focused on what you could have done better.
Right, and neuroticism can fuel those feelings even more because you're constantly worried about making mistakes.
So you're already predisposed to negative self-talk, and then the imposter thoughts make it worse.
Exactly. And with low self-esteem, it's hard to believe your successes are real. You might think it was just luck or something external.
So you're basically confirming your own negative beliefs.
Right, and all of these factors can create a vicious cycle where you constantly feel like you're falling short.
Even when you're actually succeeding.
Exactly.
Before we move on, I have to ask, is there a positive side to imposter syndrome? Wikipedia doesn't really talk about this, but I'm curious.
That's an interesting question.
Like, could a little self-doubt actually be a good thing?
I mean, it does sound counterintuitive.
I know, but think about it.
Yeah.
We're always told to be confident. But what if a little self-doubt makes us more humble and motivated?
Okay, I see what you mean.
Maybe it helps us avoid becoming overconfident or arrogant.
Like the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Exactly. Where incompetent people overestimate their abilities. Maybe imposter syndrome prevents that.
So you're saying it keeps us grounded and makes us more self-aware.
Yeah, and more driven to learn and improve.
I like that perspective. Instead of seeing self-doubt as purely negative, maybe we can reframe it as a motivator.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot between healthy self-questioning and debilitating self-sabotage.
That's the key. And I think understanding the different imposter types can help us find that balance.
Oh yeah, Wikipedia mentions those. Can you tell us more about them?
Sure. So there's the expert who always feels like they need to know everything.
Oh, I know that type. Always second-guessing themselves.
And then there's the perfectionist who sets impossibly high standards and beats themselves up over tiny mistakes.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that one.
And then there's the superwoman or superman who tries to be perfect in every area of life.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And there are a few other types, but the point is recognizing your own type can help you understand your patterns and triggers.
Like having a roadmap to your own self-doubt.
Exactly.
So once you have that roadmap, what are some things you can actually do to manage those feelings?
Well, Wikipedia has some good tips. One that I like is to embrace your fears.
Embrace your fears. How does that work?
When you try to ignore them, they just get stronger. But when you acknowledge them and talk about them, they lose their power.
So it's like shining a light on them.
Exactly. And another tip is to remember your past achievements.
Oh, I love that. Like keeping a list of your successes.
Yes. So when those imposter voices start talking, you can remind yourself of all the things you've accomplished.
That's a great idea. And Wikipedia also mentions seeking support from others.
Yes. Talking to someone who understands can be so helpful.
It helps you realize you're not alone.
Exactly. And it can also help you reframe those negative thoughts.
Yeah, instead of accepting those negative beliefs as truth, you can challenge them.
Right. You can look for evidence that contradicts those beliefs.
Like if you keep telling yourself you're not smart enough, think about times when you've been successful.
Exactly. Focus on the evidence, not the negative self-talk.
And Wikipedia also mentions group therapy as a way to connect with others who get it.
Yes, group therapy can be a really supportive environment.
It's like a community of imposters who can help each other.
Right, and that sense of shared experience can be really powerful.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but before we wrap up, I want to go back to that idea of a positive side to imposter syndrome.
You mean the idea that some self-doubt can be beneficial?
Yes. We talked about how it can keep us humble and motivated, but I'm wondering if you've had any other thoughts about it.
I have, and the more I think about it, the more I believe there's something to it. You know, in Eastern philosophy, there's this concept of beginner's mind.
What's that?
It's about approaching everything with a sense of openness and willingness to learn, even if you're an expert.
I love that.
So maybe imposter syndrome is a manifestation of that desire to keep learning and growing.
Instead of seeing it as a flaw, maybe it's a sign that we want to be better.
And it challenges the idea that confidence is the only key to success.
Maybe a little self-doubt makes us more adaptable and resilient.
And more willing to seek feedback and support.
Because nobody has all the answers.
Right. It's about embracing the journey of learning.
And recognizing that even the most successful people are still growing.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really empowering message.
Me too. It means we don't have to be perfect to be successful.
It's about embracing the process and learning from our mistakes.
And ultimately recognizing that our worthiness isn't based on our achievements.
I love that. So to all our listeners out there, if you're feeling like an imposter, remember, you're not alone.
And there are things you can do to manage those feelings.
Self-doubt is normal, but it doesn't have to control you.
Use it as fuel for growth, and remember, you are worthy just as you are.
Well said.
It's almost like it pushes you to do even better.
Yeah, like it could be a motivator.
Exactly. But how do you know when it's helpful and when it's holding you back?
That's a good question.
Oh.
I guess it comes down to self-awareness.
Right. You need to be able to recognize your patterns and triggers.
So you can catch those imposter thoughts before they spiral.
Exactly. And that's where those coping strategies come in.
Like remembering your past achievements and reframing those negative thoughts.
Right. And don't forget about seeking support from others.
It's like building a toolkit for dealing with self-doubt.
And it's important to remember this is a journey, not a destination.
It's not about reaching some perfect state of confidence.
Right. It's about developing a more realistic self-image.
One that acknowledges both your strengths and weaknesses.
And your successes and failures.
It's about giving yourself permission to be human.
To make mistakes and not have all the answers.
And still believe in yourself.
Exactly.
We all have moments of self-doubt. It's just part of life.
Absolutely. And maybe those imperfections are what make us interesting.
And relatable.
And ultimately more successful.
Because when we embrace our imperfections, we open ourselves up to new possibilities.
I like that. It shifts the focus from being perfect to embracing growth.
And it reminds us that we don't have to have it all figured out.
So if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, just remember you're not alone.
There are things you can do to manage those feelings.
Self-doubt is normal, but it doesn't have to control you.
What are some of your key takeaways from today's deep dive?
For me, it's this idea of reframing imposter syndrome as a strength.
Instead of a weakness.
Yeah, using those feelings of self-doubt to motivate you.
I like that. And for me, it's the reminder that we're all in this together.
We all have moments of self-doubt and we all make mistakes.
It's about supporting each other and embracing those imperfections.
So keep those minds curious and those imposter voices in check.
And until next time, embrace the journey.
Imperfections and all.
You know, it's really comforting in a way to know that so many people feel this way.
It really is. Like, it normalizes it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I was thinking about all the different jobs people have, and I wondered, do you think some professions are more prone to imposter syndrome than others?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if there's like hard data on that,
Yeah.
but just from experience, I think certain fields definitely attract more self-doubt.
Yeah, I can see that. Like high-pressure jobs or jobs where you're constantly being judged.
Exactly. Like surgeons or CEOs.
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Or like actors and musicians.
Right, they're always in the spotlight. So much pressure.
And what about jobs where you're expected to always have the answer? Like doctors or lawyers?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. The pressure to be perfect in those fields must be intense.
Yeah, like one wrong move and you could ruin someone's life.
It's interesting, though, because true expertise isn't about always being right.
Right. It's about knowing what you don't know and being willing to learn.
Exactly. The smartest people I know are always questioning themselves and looking for new information.
So maybe a little humility is actually a sign of true expertise.
I think so. It's about embracing that you're always learning and growing.
That's a great point. It means we don't have to be perfect to be successful.
Exactly. It's about the journey, not the destination.
I love that. Well, I think we've covered just about everything on imposter syndrome. Are there anything else you want to add?
Just that if you're struggling with these feelings, please know that you're not alone.
And there's help available.
Talk to a therapist, a mentor, a friend, anyone who can support you.
There's no shame in asking for help.
And remember, be kind to yourself. You're doing the best you can.
That's such an important reminder. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive on imposter syndrome.
Thanks for having me.
It was great having you on the show. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Mental Minute.
Mhm.
Remember to keep those minds curious, and we'll see you next time.